yeux de lumière qui voient passer au loin les oiseaux.
I added, actually, this is a major issue, disabled people, people with disabilities, in many cases, and for a long time, their rights have been not respected. And it is still the case in many situations that certain rights are denied. And then I added something for the future, or already to some extent for today. That's computers and robots. Now you can say a robot or computer as such is not relevant. That's a machine. But if you look at current discussions, Mr. Bezos having the idea of implanting, I think it's Bezos or the guy from Tesla, of having certain implants that your brain actually can directly connect to the computer for certain functions. Or even if you look at, what was his name? He recently died. This physician, forgot the name. But he was kind of completely depending on certain support that helped him to communicate. He was a genius. He was one of the leading scientists in physics, but he couldn't speak. And it was not just being mute, deaf or something, it was some brain function had to be kind of replaced to make it possible for him to articulate himself in language. So it was not sign language he could use, it was a completely different system. As well, in a way, it is not a robot, but people who are depending on certain organs. Are they human beings? If you have to go every week twice or something to be connected your kidney to the machine. At least your sovereignty will be limited, because this is the time where you cannot participate in society. Plus, you cannot fully participate in society because you have to organize your life in a way that there are certain days, certain times you have to go to the hospital and get connected to this machine. What does it mean in terms of your overall sovereignty? Is this limiting only sovereignty in this certain area, or does it mean that your entire sovereignty is limited? Especially then when it comes to the situation where certain brain functions are taken over by a computer, by a robot. I come back in a way to these cars. It's a legal issue then. Who is responsible? There have been a few accidents with these self-driving cars, automatic cars. Who is responsible if there is no driver in the car? And they drive, cause an accident. If there's a car, you can go to the driver and say, sorry, you did something wrong. You did something not right. But now you go to the car, you open the door, and there is nobody sitting there. And you say, sorry, drive on. No, of course you don't. But who is responsible? Is it the person who told this car, go and get me some coffee? Or me from the canteen, the rice I don't want, I don't know what else? Or is it the programmer of the car who made it possible that I use the car, but I cannot control it fully? Or is it the person who built the car, or the company who built the car, with this equipment? Or will we have a court where there is a car driving into the courtroom and saying, well, here I am. I'm guilty. So what happens here in terms of rights and obligations? Who is responsible? Now the what? I said, in general terms, it's sovereignty. The decision I take, being responsible for myself, but as well for the consequences of my action. I'm responsible to drive this car. I'm responsible if I knock down the wall, which is not really a problem. You just build the wall new. But if it's about human beings, other human beings, it's a problem. So my sovereignty is limited. Drink driving is a limitation. If you drink alcohol, your reaction is slowed down and you are not allowed to drive anymore. Speed limit is a limitation because you are allowed to drive, but only with 50 kilometers per hour. Otherwise, it is considered to be dangerous, too dangerous. With 50 kilometers, it's okay, you are reasonably in control. With 60, not anymore, with 100, not at all. And there are limits. So in individual cases, we can more or less easily decide what it means when we limit your sovereignty, when we limit your right to decide what you're doing. But I said the last time that the beginning of human rights discussion had been linked, on the one hand, to this war, the nation state being established, and I mentioned this one, enlightenment, that was in the widest sense, philosophical new understanding of we are enlightened people and we are not depending on the decisions of others, but we can decide, we possess ourselves. Now the slaves had been obviously possessed by somebody else, by the slaveholder. You went to the market, you bought your slave, and that was it. But there had been another possession, alien possession by somebody else, that was the feudal system. In the feudal system, you had been subject to the queen or king, and they couldn't, you had not been possessed literally by the royal house, but they had been in control, meaning you had been responsible to the royalty, to the nobility. Meaning when they said you go to war, you had to go to war. That's this extreme. You worked, but you had not been employed, but you worked on your farmland and you had to give a certain amount of what you harvested to the landowner, to the nobility. This is what I said, enlightenment was this movement of we possess ourselves. We are not owned, we are not possessed by the nobility, by the princes, by the knights, by the, no, not the knights, sorry, by the princes, by the earls, by the kings. We possess ourselves. And we have certain rights. We have this right of being sovereign people. Sovereign people as individuals, not as the people of Mongolia or something, but as individuals. We are sovereign people. And this entire movement, if you want, development of enlightenment had been issued on 3 levels. The one was, if you want the philosophical, it was the humane level of people living. This was a philosophical one. Of individuals being responsible for others. I am responsible for what I do. I am enlightened, and I don't give the responsibility away, and it cannot be taken from me. And if I give the responsibility away, I do it because I think in a certain case it is reasonable to do it. Can you imagine something where I do it? Where I give responsibility away? A tiny, small thing. Go out for a drink tonight and have your motor scooter, your car or whatever, and then you say after 2 drinks, here's the key. I know I will drive, but I shouldn't when I'm drunk. So here's the key, keep it. Give it back to me tomorrow. Or what you do. You give a certain amount, in a certain way, you give your responsibility to me that I teach on this subject, and you say, okay, I trust he is able, I trust the university is selecting the right people to do this, and it's not somebody who will talk complete rubbish. There may be some mistakes or something like this. There may be something, it's not the complete story because we only have 32 lessons, sessions, but by and large it's fine. So you give responsibility away to some extent. And you decide doing so. That's, or part of this is you act in a way that's the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. You act in a way that your action can be a standard for the action of society and of others. What you do is something you allow anybody else to do. And of course, you do not allow yourself, or you do not kill other people and say, well, others can kill me, so I can kill them. What you do is what you allow others, what you would allow others to do as well. Categorical imperative. Always take your action, the standards of your action, as a standard for everybody else. Then you have, not then, you have at the same time enlightenment, the economic dimension. It's a completely new economic system of sovereign individuals, not depending on the royalty, on the nobility, but looking after themselves. Adam Smith, Scottish economist and moral philosopher, he was developing this system of, he was one of these founding fathers, so-called founding fathers of modern economy, that everybody produces for himself. Herself was not really relevant at the time. Produces for himself, enters the market, and exchanges goods and services. So it's this free exchange that matters. Everybody equal, everybody being equal. Of course, this was not the case, but this was the idea. If everybody can go to the market, everybody can produce something and can decide to act on the market. Same conditions. And then you have the political dimension, meaning this state. As I said, 30 years, war, peace, treaty. But this idea of a nation state was then developed as we know it today. It was not just 30 years, okay, let's sign and that's it. There was a development then. Now I don't want... Okay. Monsieur, French, today we would say probably political scientist, emphasizing, as Kant did, as Smith did, the individual, self-responsible, possessing him herself, being as such human being, in a state, and this was a major point always made for Montesquieu, the separation of power. That you have the state, and the previous state, the feudal state, had been especially made known, the meaning of it, by the French king Louis XIV, who said, L'état c'est moi, I am the state. The rest doesn't interest me. I am the state. Everything has to be there for me. I issue laws, I control the laws, I execute the laws. Of course, not personally, I have my people who are doing this, but it's all in my responsibility. And then Le Baron, Montesquieu said, no, hang on. This is not what we need. There's nobody possessing him or herself. This is complete dependence. What we need is a separation of powers. Issuing laws, there is one institution in the state that issues laws, that says from today on, in cities you are only allowed to drive 50 kilometers per hour, by law. From today, every child has to go to school, by law, from the age of 6 to the age of 10, to the age of 14. This is what the law says. Then you have the executive, who gets basically the order, build schools. Every child now has to go to school. And that means we have to have enough schools. Now, terms and conditions apply, meaning what does it mean to go to school? Does it mean every day per week for 6 hours? Does it mean 1 hour per day? So this, of course, determines how many or what kind of schools you need. Do they learn just basics of writing? Or do they learn basics of writing, foreign language, biology, you name it? And then you have the judicative, meaning somebody has to control it. They have to control the laws. Is it actually lawful to force every child to go to school? What a stupid thing to ask, isn't it? Is it lawful to force people to go to school, children? Is it really so stupid? It was the sovereignty. I limit the freedom of the child by saying you have to go to school. Sorry about this. I know you want to play, but you have to go to school. And this body has to control if the law is lawful. For instance, they may say it's lawful up to 10 years, it's fine, but up to 14 years, that's really limiting the sovereignty. Or it's fine for children, but not for people who are 20 and didn't go to school before. It's lawful to enforce foreign language learning, but only English, or only Chinese, because that's one of the most spoken languages. So they control the law and they control the executive, they control if it's implemented. Every city has enough spaces for children to go to school, and there is one that doesn't, where the Lord Mayor says, go. There's so many nice things we can do. We build a theater, we build a sports ground, but no school. It's much more fun. And then they say, no, sorry, this is not on, you have to build schools. But now the Lord Mayor is actually clever. It says, but they learn so much in theater and on the sports ground. They learn much more there than in the school. And if he is really clever, he actually manages to convince them and say, yes, actually, they communicate with others, they learn language, they have to make their notes in a competition. So we go there, let's build them under certain conditions. So conditionality is always kind of important. As I said, and this is where we will continue next time, all this meant enlightenment that the definition of what had been considered as being important, that this had been defined more and more, fine-tuned in terms of what had been recognized by the state as sovereign state, as compatible with the sovereignty of the people. And in a way you see already there, really in a germinating, this point where it is, and why it is important, that, and the way we talk about human beings, human rights. Because you have this sovereignty of two. You have the sovereignty of the state, and you have the sovereignty of its people. Not the people of Laos, but every citizen there. They can decide what they think is right. This is their sovereignty. But the state has the right, the sovereignty, to say, no, everybody has to go to school. No, I want to play. No, you have to go to school. No, I want to play. Now we go to play, and next time, next Monday, we'll go to school again. Thank you.